that sounds really, really cool. I'd love to go and experience this. And so these are all daytime.
No, well, that's the other thing too. We have evening shows and matinees, so it's a different show depending on the weather, depending on the time of day. We have different audio cues that are given. We have different lighting cues that are different that are given each day or each performance. And then, if the weather's so bad and we actually can't perform outside, then we have different blocking for those scenes that happen inside.
Hmm.
So they always keep us guessing.
Well, that's good. So there's a healthy dose of a healthy amount of improv that's
Yeah,
occurring.
I mean, much like a ride across Maine, improvisation and flexibility is key.
Yes, certainly. That's a good segue. So it's
Yeah.
12:02. Let's begin. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking with Todd Cerveris today about his journey as a professional actor, professional photographer, and also working as an avid cyclist who enjoys bike touring in different places with the combined effect of raising money through his pedal strokes. So everything from identifying where the money could go as what who should be the donor, the recipient, where can donors be found? How do you handle the money? How do you make sure you're thanking everyone adequately? And then there's just going to be a great story embedded with everything in it, because we're talking about Todd's journey when he rode from Bar Harbor to Quebec City last fall. And so my relationship with Todd began I guess it was sometime in the summer, when Todd connected with the Bicycle Coalition in Maine and was looking for advice on like how to string a route together that would go through Maine and fulfill his quest to do this fundraising ride. And so we've had a good conversation since then. I got to meet Todd as he went through on that ride. So I'm really looking forward to doing this talk with Todd, because I think each one of us that's on this call probably has some interest in at some point, or has at some point been in a ride that involves some sort of fundraising. It can feel really daunting. And I think what we can learn from what Todd will talk to us about is that the benefits of doing these are really pretty magnificent as well. So that's today's topic. Before we get too far into that, I do want to thank Tandem Coffee. Tandem Coffee is our webinar sponsor for this entire series that we do in the winter and into the spring. They have 2 locations in Portland, delicious coffee, more delicious even pastries and other baked goods. So if you're in the Portland area, you can get some of that fresh baked stuff. If you want to order some good coffee, you can do that from anywhere in the world through their website. So thank you, Tandem Coffee. My name is Eric Da Silva. I help manage the education program at the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. And the Bicycle Coalition of Maine is the statewide voice for education and advocacy in the state of Maine. We do a lot of work, everything from talking to kindergartners and encouraging them to be great bicycle riders and to choose active transportation, to speaking with adults about how to drive safely near vulnerable users and working with municipalities to make infrastructure better for everyone. Thank you for supporting the BCM. I'd like to welcome Todd, and Todd's got some great slides that he's going to bring up soon. But maybe Todd, just to begin with, tell us a little bit about what brought you to the BCM in the first place.
Well, like you said, what brought me to BCM was route advice initially. When I made my initial decision to do the bike ride in Maine, it grew out of having done several other rides. I've been doing long bike rides for quite a while, but most recently and post-pandemic, I had been doing riding the Empire State Trail, which had recently opened in New York State. So I was riding. You can ride. I think the total distance is 750 miles. You can ride from Battery Park to Rouse's Point, which is the very top of New York State. And I actually continued a little bit further on into Montreal. But then also you can ride from Albany on the east side all the way to the west side at Buffalo. Although in my case, I did Niagara Falls, but same difference. And had been enjoying the trail with all of that. the ability to not have to worry about cars and ride a slightly more rugged terrain, and wanted to continue that. So Maine was sort of where I ended up picking a destination for. And you raised a really interesting point that I kind of forgot about earlier, which is when you do a fundraising ride, how do you pick the charities that you're raising money for? And obviously, that's going to be a very personal decision. Everybody can pick whatever causes mean the most to them. And there are factors that would probably go into considering that. One of them are things like how you're going to handle the money. And why that matters is a lot of more established recipient organizations will have their own portals by which people can make donations directly to the organization. If people are just writing you a check, you end up with $500, $1,500, $5,000 in money, which in tax purposes, you're getting all this money and then you're making a donation. You've got to figure out where the money goes. And an organization that has its own portal can allow people to make donations in your name, but the money never touches your accounts. So it's easier in that respect. And then, which organization is important too. In my case, I chose World Bicycle Relief and the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. World Bicycle Relief, because I just think what they do is tremendous and simple and effective. They build bikes. It was initially started by SRAM bicycle parts in response to a tsunami that happened in Sri Lanka. And basically what they do is they build these really reliable, really simple bicycles and make them available for people in developing nations, school people, school kids, teachers, medical professionals, entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. And it's the simplest thing in the world. Give them transportation and you instantly improve their lives, and low cost, reliable transportation. So young women can get to school without threat of assault in the early morning hours or later in the evening. Medical professionals can widen their scope of influence immensely by having a bicycle. Entrepreneurs can also likewise widen their markets and serve a much greater community. So I mean, there are as many ways to use a bicycle to improve an economy, especially a developing economy, as you can possibly imagine. So I like World Bicycle Relief for that reason. And then National Multiple Sclerosis Society, because I actually was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2004. I'm fortunate to be in a state where my symptoms are modest enough and manageable enough that it doesn't really affect me, and obviously doesn't prevent me from doing a long bike ride. But I've had my episodes, and I'm aware of the possibilities of where it could go. MS is a really interesting condition right now, in that there is a lot of research being done, and there are a lot of advances being made. And I wanted to be able to support that scientific research and community development and that kind of thing.
My father-in-law has MS, and he's in a wheelchair. He lost mobility in his legs
I'm sorry.
35 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm I'm actually surprised this is the first that we've talked about this.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy for you that you found a way to mitigate it. And are you on medication to stop its
I
progression?
take weekly injections, of an interferon. And that's your father-in-law's experience mirrors exactly what a friend of mine who is a neurologist told me very early on when I was initially diagnosed and trying to get the lay of the land. He said, saying you have MS actually is kind of like saying you have a red house. It's as accurate as it is vague a description. And it can manifest in a number of different ways. And the strange thing about MS is that it has so many weird and apparently unrelated symptoms that it can be hard to diagnose for a long time. And while the condition is continuing to put damage and stress on your body until you're able to get the proper treatment. Typically, diagnoses have happened by a sort of aggregate of symptoms. And people say, well, it's not this, it's not that. I guess it's MS. Because there's no specific test, or there wasn't a specific test. They have gotten much closer to having a specific. There's a spinal tap that they can do that indicates pretty severely, or pretty specifically, the presence of multiple sclerosis. But again, it's not like a virus that you can find that say, aha, we found it. Here it is.
How do
Um,
you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you handle those injections when you're away from your doctor for a week or more?
that's a great question. And in fact, when I was on my ride, I met another rider who has a psoriatic condition where he also has to have injections that he takes on a regular basis. And like me, his injections need to be refrigerated. And he was riding actually across the country. And I said, so how does that work? In my case, I was fortunate. I can skip a week and be okay. So if I'm doing a 2-week ride, I do one shot the day before the ride, and then I do one as soon as I get back from it, and I skip the week. My doctor isn't thrilled about my doing that, but he said if now and again you miss a shot, it's more about the regularity, so that's fine. In this other cyclist case, he has done what I've done in the past, where you have a small thermos, like a little espresso-sized Starbucks thermos. He puts some of the shots, some of the injections in there. They're usually pre-filled syringes, and you can add some ice or very cold, a cold pack or something, and you keep the thermos with you on the bike. And then you'll pack your needles and your alcohol swabs and Band-Aids and whatever else you might need, wherever else you put all your other stuff. But it's one of the many challenges, and it's also not an insurmountable one either. And like many of them, I also found out, one of the things I was considering was possibly just having people send me stuff along the way. If I were to do a long ride, another option would be to have somebody ship some medication to me at points along the way, much like people do with if they're walking the Appalachian Trail, they'll have stuff sent to them at certain points along the way. So that would be another option.
Yeah. Oh, well, it sounds like you've figured it out, at least for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rule of thumb is don't look at the whole problem, look at the steps along the way and figure those out. Don't try to solve the whole thing all at once.
Hmm. Well, would you like to start
Shall I do
your
my
slide
thing?
deck?
Yeah. Let me see here. All right. So, okay. So yeah, in planning the ride, I like to name my rides. It gives it an identity. It gives me a way to talk about it. Sometimes can make it look like I'm part of um, a larger event too, and sometimes that makes people sort of pay a little bit more attention to it along the way. But yeah, Shortest Seaway 2023 was a self-supported solo trip. The initial route was 625 miles. Actually, it worked out to be about 675 miles, probably because of wrong turns and just little side trips along the way. I did it in September, which seemed to be the best time, one of the best times to do a ride like this, given that I'm out of mosquito season and black fly season before the really hard weather of the winter sets in. I did, however, run into some hurricane issues and storm issues, which I'll talk about later. But if it's not one thing, it's another. So you always have to sort of figure things out. The first question is, why did I even think I could do a ride like this? I've always been a cyclist, and I've had been riding my bike a lot. But saying, I'm going to take a 20-mile ride on one day, and deciding I'm going to take a 675-mile ride over a couple of weeks is a different thing. So physically, I had my previous experience, and I understand that in riding 50 miles is just 10 miles ridden 5 times. And if you can ride 10 miles and not be crippled by it, then you can probably do that again. And then you do that again, and then you do that again. So it's not a more strenuous effort at any point along the way. It's just a longer one. Also at speed, if you are riding 45 miles and you ride 15 miles an hour, it takes about 3 hours. If you ride at 12 miles an hour, it takes 3 hours and 45 minutes. So the difference between 3 hours and 3 hours and 45 minutes is much less than the difference between 15 miles an hour and 12 miles an hour. What I mean by that is if you just ease off a little bit, you don't have to kill yourself and you'll be able to get stuff done that you didn't think you could do. Mentally, how do you survive for 12 days on a bike? I had podcasts and music, that kept me busy, kept me occupied. Also, silence isn't silent. I was surprised how many times I would get on my bike and start writing and realize I hadn't turned on any podcasts or any music. And I was just sort of thinking and listening to the wind and watching the countryside go by. And, stuff comes up that you have time to think about on a more deep level that you might not otherwise have been able to do. And that was also something we all learned during the pandemic. The restlessness of the pandemic allowed, I think, everybody to go a little deeper. And I wanted to continue to do that. I also, after the pandemic, wanted to get out a lot. And even with the pandemic, a long bike ride is a good way to stay out of the way of various viruses and such, because most viruses don't travel at 50 miles an hour. Financially is a big issue too. Cycling doesn't have to be an expensive thing. It can be easily, but you can just take whatever equipment you have, maybe give it a shake and a lube, lube on the chain and brush off some of the rust, and you're good to go. When I did one of my earlier rides, I stopped off at a bike shop to get some tubes or something, inner tubes, and a guy said, "Oh, I love that bike. It's a nice bike. It's a nice retro choice, And I said, "It's not a retro choice. It's just my bike." It was a 20-year-old Bianchi that I love and is a great, solid, reliable bike, but it's definitely not cutting edge by any stretch. So he thought I was doing something vintage. And I said, no, I'm vintage. And my bike just shows it. Housing, if you're going on a multi-day ride, you can be really creative. There are options for either bike camping, staying with host families through an organization called Warm Showers that I'll talk about later. There's also motels and Airbnbs if you want. Too many of those becomes expensive after a while, but you can also find good deals, and hostels you can stay at. You can also, I have reached out to churches to ask them if I could camp in their backyard along the way. I have reached out when I was doing the Erie Canal Trail. I was able to camp right outside the dock operators' offices. And they just think that's kind of a cool thing. When people find out what you're doing, they want to help you and they want to find a way that's not going to, be a huge financial investment on their part. But if they can just give you a room, or you have a friend of a friend who says, yeah, you can crash on our couch in the basement, that's fine.
It sounds like, Todd, that if I were going to go up to the dock operator and say, I'm just riding across the country, can I crash here? That wouldn't sound quite as appealing to that person if instead I had said like, hi, I'm riding across the country to raise money for such and such an organization. All of a sudden you've really like unlocked a couple doors there just by sharing your mission. Do you find right. that's true often?
That's right. Yeah. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too. One of the things about fundraising is it justifies an awful lot and it validates an awful lot. It gives you a purpose and a reason for doing something which can otherwise just feel like an indulgent, fun trip. So it becomes not just about you, but that's a really good point. Previous experience, I had done group rides for AIDS fundraisers, Boston to New York, that was 250 miles, Fairbanks to Anchorage, which was awesome. The turn sheet was about this long. So it was like turn left, ride 70 miles, turn right, ride 90 miles. All of those things, I was riding with the group. I had gear was transported, meals were provided, roads were blocked off, had support crew, like it couldn't have been easier. When I started doing solo rides, I rode New York to Montreal as my first one. My wife was my support crew. She drove the 70 miles that I was riding each day and would just meet me at the end, but she would be carrying all my bags and everything. We ate at restaurants, stayed at B&Bs and hotels, and I was on the trail, the Empire State Trail. Niagara Falls, same thing, except she couldn't come with me, so I had to carry all my stuff. So I started learning how to pack on the bike. And I started exploring things like warm showers and host families along the way.
So what led to you leaving? Because this is actually one of my questions was
Yeah.
there's a team effort in fundraising, and that's these big group rides that we see all over the country. Many of us have participated in. It sounds like you were involved in a couple. And then there was this transition to doing these solo fundraising rides. And was that related to looking for that silence and having time to be introspective?
It probably was. It probably was. But also, sometimes the rides just don't go where I want to go. They're not as long as I want to do. If a lot of the group rides that are fundraisers are terrific, but also part of what you're paying for is all the group structure, all the transport, the meals provided, and the support crew and all of that. And I wanted my money to go directly to the organizations. Um, Also, I wanted a little bit more of a challenge. A lot of times group rides are just roads that are blocked off. I wanted to start doing some trail riding. And I'm sure if you continue to look, you can find those kinds of things. But finding those that are also a fundraiser and are also, a good weather situation that you want to take advantage of, it can be a little challenging at a time. So, and something about saying, I'm going to step out of the door of my house and I'll meet you in Montreal is kind of appealing. So, when I was looking for where to go next, I was looking at various things I had to consider. I wanted to have safe routes, trails primarily. I wanted a varied terrain, and I wanted to be able to get there and back easily, not having to take a plane or something. Um, a lot of cars. I didn't want a lot of cars. I didn't want it to be too hot, and I wanted long stretches where I could just sort of ride and think. Um, Little trees, little water, some small towns, some camping, nothing too urban. So I looked around and then apparently I was heading to Maine. That was how I put all that together. So that was the route that I put together. And that was where Eric, you and I started talking because I started reaching out to organizations in Maine to find out where I could go, what the direction, what the reasonable routes were. And you were the one that suggested that I go through Baxter State Park, which I'm really glad I did. That was terrific. You were also one that said, oh, yeah, that whole big part of Maine, the northwest section, can't ride through there. I kept finding roads and saying, what do you mean I can't ride through there? You're like, that's logging trucks. Even if you do get through, they will kill you. Which, I see now why you said that.
Yeah, we're working on that. One day, I am optimistic that we will be able to bicycle through that part of our state.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful. And I definitely got a good flavor of that when I was riding through Baxter. And then also another friend of mine had told me about the sunrise on Cadillac Mountain. And I said, well, I got to start my ride on Cadillac Mountain. That sounds great on a sunrise or on a sunrise. At dawn.
Sunrise.
Thank you. I feel like Porky Pig. Thank you. Why make it a fundraising ride? We were talking about this. I'd had previous experience, AIDS rides, MS fundraisers, team in training, which is for leukemia. So I knew a little bit about how these things go. Like I say, it provides a structure to what you're doing, and also provides a bit of a commitment. Um, if you say I'm doing this ride and I'm doing a fundraising ride, you're telling people that you're going to do this thing. You're talking about it a lot. And so you're likely to do it. If I make the decision, I'm going to go on this long ride and then maybe I'm feeling just not quite feeling it, or it gets a little difficult, or I'm getting kind of tired, I might be inclined to cut it short or bow out of it, which would not be the worst thing in the world, but having the impetus of the responsibility of fundraising pushes you a little bit further to go a little bit more than you might otherwise. Also, like I say, it gives you permission. Gives you permission to ask the dock operator at the canal if you can crash there outside. It gives you permission to post a lot of stuff and talk about it on your social media and not look like you're just bragging or talking about yourself all the time. Um, it gives you permission to take the time off to make the investment, to invest in yourself. It's funny that we need permission to invest time in ourselves and in our own experiences, but sometimes we do.
That's one of the most that's one of the most impactful things that I think you have to say about the permission part too.
Yeah.
It's so incredible that we can feel guilt so easily just for taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, a 2 week bike ride. And somehow I need permission to do that, but I do.
Hmm.
Exactly. How do you ask for money? How do you make it a fundraising ride? It's a good question. Like I say, the recipient organizations are things that you want to think about where you're going for. And I know people that have done fundraising for, a friend who's going through chemotherapy and they have their family needs help. You can do a GoFundMe, for that kind of thing. I know people that do fundraising as part of, like I do with other organizations, and you attach yourself to them, do what they call DIY fundraisers. Goals, plan the fundraising goal and the target for when you're going to do the event. Um, it gives you permission and encourages you to make more publicity about it, to establish a public presence about the ride. Handling donations, like I say, some channels, some organizations have a direct to the recipient pipeline, so you can set up donations that way. What you can also do too is find a fiscal sponsorship through another organization that has a 501(c)(3) status. They are oftentimes able to, it's an umbrella thing where they can accept donations on your behalf and then make that distribution to the charity. Sometimes they'll take like a 1% administrative fee, but it allows people to make a contribution to a 501(c)(3) organization, which allows for tax deductions if they itemize. It allows for the notion that they're not just giving you $100 that you might decide to go spend on your Nintendo, but that it's actually going to go to a charity. And it allows somebody else to handle all of that so that you don't have all this money coming through your tax accounts in your book, and then it becomes your income that you have to sort of figure out how to handle.
Are there fiscal sponsors out there that are they advertise that they are able to do this for people such as yourself? Or do you go and find a local land trust or coalition of bicycle enthusiasts that might be able to do it for you?
That's a great question. I have in the past used an organization for fundraising efforts for the arts, for other projects. And when but I don't know specifically any ones that I have seen that advertise, but I think it's the kind of thing that you can ask around. In fact, when I had initially reached out to Bicycle Coalition of Maine, another Mariah, I think, who was working with me at the time, that was one of the questions she asked me: do you have a way to handle the funds? And I did, but I kind of got the feeling that she was saying, if you don't, we can maybe work something out that way. I don't want to make any claim on the behalf of Bicycle Coalition of Maine, but that would be, for example, a way to do that if that was something that might be possible. I don't know if BCM is set up to do that kind of thing. But there are definitely, and like everything else, Google provides all sorts of options for finding those resources. One of the things you want to ask too is, what are the donors getting back in return? You can have parties and events. You can have, just like they used to have rent parties, you can have a house party and people can make a donation that way, and that can be kind of fun. You can have a little bike race on your own, and people can make contributions in that respect, and take part in it themselves. You can have a raffle. You can give away T-shirts or other items that you might have, water bottles, but for bike rides, something like that. Lots of social media content. I'll address that in a little bit. And then you can do blog posts and newsletter. I had all my donors got a newsletter on a regular basis that updated them on the course of my training, on the course of the fundraising, and then how the ride itself went. Look at what you've already got, what sort of resources you already have at your disposal. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter or X. All of these things, we are already so connected and so plugged in to media that we can turn that around and use that to our advantage in terms of making a public platform. I set up a website. I already have a website for my other work, so I just did a page on my website. Go to your address book, find emails and even snail mail. Start sending direct mails. If you worry about, well, people aren't going to like getting all these emails in their inboxes. People just delete stuff they don't want. Nobody, to my experience, is ever particularly offended by, oh, you're asking me to raise, to donate money to this charity again, like enough. Like if it's too much, they just put it in there, delete it. But oftentimes they remind me, oh, good, I'm glad you're reminding me again, because I've got 12 other things going on right now. So I'm glad you sent that reminder to me. I need to write that check. Bulletin boards, coffee shops, school announcements, maybe a bulletin board at work. You can put up a little poster that way, and people see things where the water cooler or the coffee machine. And then companies oftentimes will have matching gifts for financial for fundraising projects that their employees are working on. You have to ask yourself what you're comfortable with. Are you comfortable saying, hey, I'm doing this ride. Can you donate $50 for this project? Some, a bit of a hard sell. Some people aren't so interested in that or aren't so comfortable with that. So you can say things like, so, I'm trying to raise $3,000. If that's something you'd be interested in, here's a link. You can go to this spot. Again, having a donor channel allows you to just give people the opportunity to make a donation in their own time, in their own way, at their own pace. A lot of organizations will provide you with digital assets and branding. And what I mean by that is like a logo or some videos or, other things that you can click on this link and we'll post something instantly to your Facebook account. They'll provide that kind of stuff. It's really easy to spend a lot of time on this kind of stuff. So you also need to be realistic with how much time you have in your schedule, what your skill set is. If you like making little videos, great. If you don't worry, you don't need to do that. Think about your expectations, what you want to achieve, which are not the same things as your goals. Expectations they involve a little bit more realistic understanding of what's possible. Goals are more what you'd like to do. And a website that I set up that had, had my logo, a little goal people could follow, various videos along the way that I'll show you in a little bit. I had a blog where I talked about my riding. That's my vintage Bianchi right there. And I had thank you videos on my Facebook to let everybody who had made a donation also have their time as well. And it would scroll a list of everybody that had made a donation, and everybody on my Facebook feed who saw my videos saw that. So people got public thank yous. And I think that really encouraged people. I actually had one guy say, yeah, I want to make a donation. I want to see my name in one of those videos. So ECM is a terrific. You can also do videos like these that I posted on my Facebook page. ECM is a terrific resource for and advocate of cyclists and pedestrians all across the state. They're committed to safe, healthy, and environmentally friendly commuting and recreation all over Maine. Eric is also a pretty great ambassador for Maine tourism. I spoke with him about what I can expect to see while riding through some of the parks there, and you can see how infectious his enthusiasm is and why I'm looking forward to this ride.
I think you're starting in Acadia National Park. You're going to have a beautiful sunrise on top of Cadillac Mountain.
So my name's Dana Mealy. I'm the president of the Greater New York City Long Island chapter at the National MS Society.
And is the National MS Society a fundraising organization or a service organization, a lobbying group, support network, resource for patients? What does it do?
D, all of the above, Todd.
There. So I spoke with Community Marketing Associate Alex G, who told me a little bit more about the organization and its mission.
We are a global organization working to deliver a sturdy-made bicycle into communities where transportation is a challenge.
Well, thank you for doing this video. I brought you here to ask you 5 questions about Maine. First question, your play, Almost Maine, is set in a fictional town called Almost because it's not actually incorporated, so it's only almost a town.
Yeah.
Which of these is also the name of a fictitious town in Maine? So I had a lot of fun with those, and I had actually done a production of Almost Maine, and I knew John, so I was able to reach out to him for that video. But yeah, anything you want to do. I thought it was nice to have some videos where people could find out about the organizations I was raising money for as well. So I wasn't just raising money, I was raising awareness. When you're putting up content, short, punchy videos are usually pretty good. Things with faces tend to get people's attention. Regular, frequent posts I found to be helpful rather than just throwing a lot of photos at people. Span things out over time. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Whatever you're doing, it doesn't have to be like always just so. It's more about just getting stuff out there on a regular basis. And ask people to share your posts. Ask them. I had the mother of a friend make a donation who was not following me, not on my list of friends, but he had posted something on his Facebook page and his mom donated. And I called him that and he said, "Oh my God, that's amazing. My mom must be stalking me on Facebook." Pick a fundraising goal that's just a little bit beyond what you think is likely to get. And this is what I mean with the difference between expectations and goals. My goal was $6,000 to raise money for. I thought maybe I might be able to get $4,500. I ended up raising over $7,000. So, have something that makes you go a little bit deeper. One thing to keep in mind is that donations are not a measure of your friendships. People will give if they're of a mind and of a financial position to do so. If they're not, it doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean they're not your friends. They just aren't in a place to do that right now. So don't place any value on that. And that, I think, because I know that because I have been asked to contribute to a fundraiser at times, and there are times when I happen to be more flush and I will do so. And if I'm not, not able to do so, but it has nothing to do with how I feel about the person. Sometimes it has a little bit more about how I feel about what the purpose is that they're raising money for, but it's not a relationship to a measure of the friendship. Planning the route, search for bike organizations, bike shops. Google satellite view can be helpful to find out what the roads actually look like. Call local bike shops, organizations, weather reports. Ride with GPS is a good way to plan your route. Warm Showers is a great organization. And there are a bunch of these things that I have listed that in that show notes document, Eric, that I provided to you. But they're an organization that helps people provide housing to traveling cyclists. And it's amazing. It's a global organization. And it's really great. You meet some really interesting people and hear some really great stories that way. Do you want to go camping? Do you want to look for Airbnbs or hotels? When I was doing the Empire State Trail, I started reading Facebook accounts of other people who had been doing the trails. So I was able to find out what part of the route that I wanted to do or what parts of the route I wanted to avoid. And finally, after all that preparation, it's time for the actual ride. So I'll show some videos and still photos, but I thought I would take this time, Eric, if you had any other questions that you wanted to go over and wrap up about the fundraising portion of it all.
Yeah, I think this is a quick question, but as you're receiving donations, how do you keep track of those individuals?
That's a great question. And I just had a ledger. I had a little notebook on my computer where I, was able to write down everyone's contributions, their emails, whatever contact. I had a database so that anytime I would send an email, I would just send it out to all of those people. But just my own internal record keeping. I would get notifications from either World Bicycle Relief or the National Multiple Sclerosis Society that a donation was made. And with that notification, I would get the information of how to contact them and send them a thank you and all that kind of thing. So I just recorded that on a file on my computer.
Okay. The other question I had regarding looking for fundraising for people to give is how do you approach balancing, I'm going to ask some families I know, some friends I know, versus I'm going to ask look for some corporate sponsors that can give thousands, not tens or hundreds of dollars.
How to do that?
Yeah, well, how do you go about, like, it seems very tempting to, like, okay, I'm going to ask like Anthem, like a insurance company, and they're going to give me like $2,000 just like that, versus I'm going to ask 200 people and they're going to give me $10 each. So
that's a great question. I don't have a ready answer for that. The most accurate, the most encompassing answer I can give is that's going to be up to your own creativity and connections. If you have anybody that works in the organization or has any connection to the organization. I would also say that a lot of organizations, and not just Anthem or whoever else, but your local bike shop or a your local bowling alley or something. They might want to have some advertising on your website. Or they might be interested in kicking in. Also, a bike shop might be able to give you free tune-ups on your bike while you're doing your training. That is no small matter. Or they might be able to give you tubes or other gear for your ride. But in terms of reaching out to corporations and trying to get corporate sponsorships, I would say the more professional and prepared your initial pitch, and brief but to the point, your initial pitch would be helpful. And then like everything else about doing a ride like this, it kind of seems like you don't know how you're going to do it until you just start taking one step after the other. And then that gives you an idea. Oh, someone says that I should reach out to this organization because they're really more inclined to do that kind of thing. So then I go to that spot. But you're going to have to just use your own creativity and your own ambition to find those.
All right, well, thanks for answering that. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions at this time before Todd continues? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself if you do. Go ahead, Todd.
Cool. So it all started with a ride up Cadillac Mountain. Because I was going up a mountain, I left my bags back at the hotel that I'd spent the night before, very early in the morning, before the sun rises, because I'm trying to get up to the mountain before the sunrise. And GoPro does this really cool thing where they edit your daily footage if you upload it. So and then they add this little music to it. So this is this little video that got provided for me, but it's kind of interesting because it reminds me a lot of the initial effort of all the fundraising and everything. It kind of feels like the rides never really started, much like the initial ride up the mountain. Then going down, I found it was kind of interesting. I wanted to go faster, but it would be easy to go way too fast. And also, you want to pull over to the side of the road a lot of times because you've got cars that are coming. But of course, it was Acadia National Park. And beautiful everywhere I went. And the whole ride down was gorgeous. And at the end of it, I had a nice meal at my campsite. And this reminded me a lot, Eric, of what you were telling me about the whole ride down Cadillac Mountain. You're actually going through like 2 or 3 different ecosystems. Some shout outs I wanted to give to bike shops along the way. In Bar Harbor Bike Shop, they helped me with some getting some sealant for my tires and getting some really set up for my chain that got in a little dry. In Orono, Rose Bike did some repair work on my pedals, and they were incredibly helpful. Also, I like stopping up bike shops along the way and hearing about what the concerns are in that part of the country. People will give you advice like, oh no, you don't want to use this kind of lube. That's for more dry conditions. You want to use this because it's going to be wetter where you're going, that kind of thing. got to Bangor, had a great dinner at Korean Dad Barbecue. And I wanted to give them a shout out. Eventually, I made it to Millinocket and stayed at the Appalachian Trail Hostel, which I highly recommend if anybody is anywhere in the area. It's one of the best hostels I've ever been to. And I got some more help from the Katahdin Gear Library as well, which I think is a great organization. I was trying to duck some rain. I actually spent an extra night in Katahdin because I had one of 3 storms that was passing through. And I had booked my campsites 2 days with 1 day overlapping. So I was going to be camping in Baxter State Park, but I knew that if I didn't get this day, I could get this day. But if I had gotten this day, I could then go to that same day, I could go to the other campsite. That makes sense. Riding along Baxter State Park was gorgeous. And you have this ring road that goes all the way around and is just this gorgeous, long, rugged trail. And it was great because it was a little misty, a little rainy still, but I was able to avoid it a lot because of the canopy. And this just kind of went on and on and on. When I
I'm
camped,
going to take you on a little tour of the campsite. Annoying. Usually it's either rain or mosquitoes, but
I love this, Todd.
so I was getting both. I was getting the full Maine experience.
okay. So I sprayed myself down with DEET, and I'm wearing this net, and I should be good.
And I was actually. I looked kind of foolish, but I was very comfortable.
It's actually very warm and dry inside. Also, and you should see that things staying with the drawing here. There's a bit wetter. And things far drier being here. I have been listening to podcasts all night, trying to sleep. I'm getting sleep. And charging my various devices. Here's where my bike is. A little soggy, but I'm best waiting for that. And there's my food. My bare hand.
So, camping was actually, it was under some adverse conditions, but it was actually still quite comfortable and everything fit perfectly well on my bike. And I could have stayed a few days, frankly, if I didn't have other plans in Baxter. It was great. Ran into some interesting challenges along the way. At one point, I got about 5 miles down one of the ATV trails, and there was some construction going on a bridge. And I either could have ridden 5 miles back and found another way around, or just walked across this route. The guys who were doing the construction looked at me a little strangely, like, "Why are you riding your bike along here?" And then also big logging trucks in Maine. So, you had to be prepared for unexpected challenges along the way. You get a lot of this kind of vista, just long, beautiful pathways and roads ahead. This was on the way back from Baxter State Park, or out of Baxter State Park on the way to Holton. The road that just kind of seemed to go on forever and ever. And I had gotten a late start because of the rain and trying to push for time. I was trying to make it to Holton before dark, and it was still raining and cold. But I got a little bit of inspiration from a sign along the way. And I did endure, and I was saved at the end by possibly one of the finest hot showers I've ever had in my life. Big shout out to Bike, Board, and Ski at Presque Isle. Amazing reception when I got there. I needed a charging cable for my Garmin watch. They took one out of the watch that they already had out of the package. And he said, they sold me that. And then they said, don't worry, we'll order a replacement one. They gave me a beer, sold me a beer that they have. I got a lot of a bike shop that also sells beer, which was very welcome at that time. And then and we talked for a while. They even walked me down to a local restaurant and got me my first whoopie pie. So I have officially been able to enjoy the Maine delicacy that is the whoopie pie. But more than anything else, just friendship and camaraderie. I can't recommend them enough. They're terrific. Riding towards the border after all the rains had let up, it was great for the day, but there was a lot of mud on the trail. And that was at a hotel that I stopped at. I stopped at a hotel because there was a hurricane on its way, and I was trying to get to Canada before the hurricane came, and I did, but I had to spend a day there while it was blowing over and cross the border. That was the border crossing there. Remarkably uneventful. And then riding towards the Seaway, again, more beautiful vistas. And then I hit some construction where the pathway simply stopped. And there were really no options to go around. So I ended up having to ride sort of an improvisatory ride through a construction site, which I probably would have been prevented from riding were it not on a Sunday. And so there's no construction going on. So I kind of didn't know where the road was going to lead, but the actual road that I had, the only other option I would have had would have been a highway that goes along the side to the left. So instead, I just had this road that I was riding along and just hoping that it didn't give out. And after about 8 miles, I was able to get back on a established route. But again, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be finding. Got to the Seaway and started to hit some more pavement and just gorgeous Canadian farms, farmhouses everywhere. And you're getting closer to the water and at the water. All the churches had the same metal roof. And I think it must have been something having to do with snow and ice prevention, but it was really beautiful. And there were a lot of churches. There's also a lot of artwork along the side of the road, and had these faces welcoming me as I was approaching Quebec City. And when I finally got to Quebec City, somehow it had escaped me. I thought there was a bridge that I was going to be riding across. But in fact, it was a ferry that I almost missed, was able to get a ticket for at the last minute. Had to walk my bike down the ramp, down the gangplank, the gangway. And so the last part of my ride, I didn't actually ride, I was boated across. Very kindly fellow took my ticket here. You're welcome. Started hearing a lot of French accents, dusting off my high school French. And there you can see in the background is the hotel where I ended up in, the Chateau Frontenac, and made it to Quebec. And found a great little Airbnb where I spent a very restful evening. So final analysis, one of the things I would say about fundraising is it sustained me as much as it allowed me to give back. The whole fundraising element was a big component of strengthening my resolve and my confidence. Any rule that I had is any branding or promotion I had to do had to be fun. I wasn't going to turn this thing into a task. I wanted to make it an enjoyable thing. Flexibility, having that built into the plan was key. Flexibility with schedule, flexibility with my route. I did change my route a little bit based on some road conditions at the time. Sometimes I would cook my own food. Sometimes I would, get something at a convenience store along the way. I don't think I went to any restaurants per se, but, would have if that was an option. Layers. That's all I can say. Layers and waterproofing and merino wool. And also there's, you've got to be prepared for all kinds of weather. Redundancy is reliability. If you have an extra set of batteries, an extra cable, whatever, an extra valve core, an extra inner tube, just an extra. I mean, yes, there will be resupply points along the way, but it's always good to have some backup of at least the small stuff. And one thing to keep in mind is I did this ride for the experience, not for the content. You can take a lot of great photos, you can do a lot of great videos, but ultimately it's for the trip itself. So it's very easy and tempting to be concerned about, where am I going to get the great shot of X, Y, Z? It didn't matter so much. I had the experience and I was able to tell people about it, but I didn't need to have like that perfect selfie. So that's that. That was my trip.
Thank you, Todd. That was really fun to watch. You put it together very well.
Thanks.
Appreciate the work you put into that.
Thanks.
So there was a question that came through. Thanks, Dan, for the comments earlier too. But Dan's asking, really just finds your trip really inspiring. And this is something we could put in our show notes, but maybe you could share it right now as well. Like, where is a good place for someone to go if they wanted to see more of the media that you put together or captured from the trip?
Oh, good question. I just didn't put that in my show notes, but
Well,
Todd
I could add it to the show notes for this recording.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. You can scroll down on my feed, you'll find some of those things. Also, my website, toddcerveris.com / I think it's STS 2023. So I have a page on my website for Shore to Seaway, and you'll see more of what my website was, what it looked like, and some of the videos that I shot. But that would be the best way to find it.
Thanks. So I'll be sure to add those to the recording notes for this.
Okay.
And I had a question about time. So with this trip, you did this trip in September. When did you begin approaching people for donations?
It's a good question. I launched my fundraiser on World Bicycle Day, which was June 6th, I think. So the fundraising started in early June. So I guess that makes about 3 months.
Oh, okay. So that's relatively quicker than I would have expected.
Yeah.
Avi has a question. Todd, are you planning a new trip? So
Good question. I don't know. I'm taking
2024?
suggestions. Yes. And I don't know when, I don't know how, like everything else, you have to work this around the rest of your schedule. So there's a little bit of variability coming up in this year. So I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. I'm also thinking I might do 2 shorter trips that I really want to do. There's a ride in Vermont that looks really great, a loop that's about 250 miles, a bikepacking route that I want to try. I also want to ride out west. I'm really keen to do some riding with a First Nations organization on the Navajo reservation. And the problem with that is I don't have a proper mountain bike. I used 35mm tires for my for this last ride, which would the bare minimum that I would have had to ride, but I would want something with like 2-inch tires to really go off-roading. So yeah.
Maybe there's a vintage mountain bike in your future.
That may, talk to my wife first, but yeah, that would be great. Or I could borrow something maybe.
Totally. Yeah, you can get bikes. An older mountain bike is easy to find on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or some garage sale.
Yeah.
You can probably buy one out there even.
Yeah. And I have friends out there too. I can maybe ask if I could borrow one of their bikes.
We have a family friend who did a tour in Cuba years ago, and he ended up taking a bike with him that he bought specifically for that event. And then when he left, he donated the bike to a family that he met along the way.
That's great.
something else to consider maybe if you found something out there or even brought something out there that you didn't plan on keeping in New York City with you.
What a great idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Todd. Thanks so much for all this advice. I found it really inspiring. I've done a lot of riding in my life, but I've always found the idea of fundraising to be extremely daunting to the point where it's easier just not to think about it and
Yeah.
just my ride. But after hearing you explain in a really methodical and digestible way, it seems a little bit more approachable now.
Yeah. It's just, one step, one foot in front of the other. And it becomes fun too. It starts to snowball.
Hmm. Well, have a great have a great play today.
Thank you.
Maybe there's going to be some parts of it that we can watch later that we can put into show notes too. Is there such a thing as a preview that includes Todd?
I wish, I wish. You can find out more about the show. It's at the Long Wharf Theater. It's the play is A View from the Bridge. So you can go to the Long Wharf website and find out more information about the production.
Okay. And you'll please let us know if you ever come to Maine
I
to do any
totally,
acting.
absolutely, yeah.
Well, thanks. And thank you everyone for joining. And we'll catch you next time, which is going to be in 2 weeks to talk about making your own gear. So that means like the bike packing bags that we saw on Todd's bikes today, or bags that you can put on your back. But how can you make this stuff on your household sewing machine instead of going and spending a bunch of money online? So maybe there's some satisfaction and interest that you learn along the way. And then the week after that, we have 2 webinars. We have a webinar with Chubby Hiker, also Chubby Biker, and then one about Vision Zero as well. So check out bikemaine.org, go to our events calendar, and you can find links for all that information there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.